Well, good morning, everybody. Happy new week. I hope you're doing amazing. We've had a week off. I was in Sydney last week and I couldn't bring an interview. And my amazing recently published author, Dr. Davina Woods, is next to me. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so you guys, today we are talking about her recently published book that I'm going to show you now on the screen, and I'm going to give you an official introduction as to who Davina is. And you can see here her book, Foster Father and Son, or Slave Master and Slave. So Davina Woods was born and raised in Brisbane. She discovered her Kuku-Djungan ancestry in the early 2000s. She earned a Diploma of Teaching in 1979 and was part of the inaugural Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Education Unit in Queensland. Her first article, Why Aboriginal Studies, was published in Quest, and she contributed to Aboriginal Women by Degrees in 2000. In 2006, her poem Urban Songlines won the Victorian Indigenous Art Cultural Heritage Award. Davina holds a Bachelor of Education, a Graduate Certificate in Aboriginal Studies, and a Master of Arts. She served as the Federal Aboriginal Education Officer of the Australian Education Union, moved to Melbourne and earned a PhD. Her essay, Being Educated, was published in Minjin, highlighting her experiences of racism and commitment to educating others about First Peoples. She fulfilled a family promise by publishing a book about her grandfather who survived an 1881 massacre. All right, that's amazing, Davina. So many accomplishments. Tell me a little bit more. Where did this passion to write this book come from?
As I said in the biography, or you said for me, there were incidences of racism at school, and my family lived in a little enclave at a place called Deepwater Bend. And I hadn't experienced racism until I started primary school. And it wasn't the first year, it was the second year of primary school. And because of my physical presentation, I think what had happened is that the child had gone home and said something about, oh, I've got a girl from Deepwater Bend in my class. And there must have been some adults who were racist and said, oh, blah, blah, blah. I won't repeat the racist phrase he used to abuse me. And so he came to school and said it at me. And I ended up having to sit in front of the principal's office for what seemed like forever to a child in grade 2 because I retaliated against him. And when I went home and I asked my family what was he talking about, and I was told, oh, that's because we're Aboriginal. And my grandfather, who was passed by the time I was born, his wife, my nana, a Scottish lady, lived a couple of blocks up from us. And I decided I'm going to sit around and listen to Nana's stories and everyone else's stories about Granddad. I'm going to learn about this Aboriginal man and why his legacy to some of us, or to all of us, had changed the way other people saw us. So I did that as a child, and then in secondary school and teachers' college, I was always interested in history, and I learnt the skills for writing history or researching history. And then when I got to the 2000s, my then husband and we knew that I'd already promised my parents, because my dad, although he was a non-Indigenous person as well, loved my grandfather very well. He had a great relationship with him. So they both wanted, if I ever found it, to be able to take them back to where Granddad was probably born. And so we did that in 2009, and then got home from that trip, and I said, I probably should write down something about what happened. And my husband said, you've got to do a PhD to finish all your studies. Why don't you include it in that? So I went back to work and I asked my colleagues who were more senior than I, who would probably be the people I'd asked to supervise my PhD. And they said, yes, 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 do it. So that's what I did. But of course, because I was working at the same time, I did it part-time and graduated in 2018. And I was very happy to receive the Most Outstanding Research Student Award. And yeah, and then I thought, I did say to Mum and Dad, but unfortunately by that time they'd passed, that I would give the family a book about what had happened. I read through my thesis. A thesis isn't something that someone who's not academic wants to read. As it is, I've been told by friends that, wow, this is really fact-filled book. So I'm taking that as a compliment, but I know it might also be saying, it's really too much for me. But no, I hope people are enjoying it as well as finding out a lot of new things. And so I started working on the drafts, and then I saw you and met you a little bit through your old publishing friend who was in Busybird. Because Les Ziggy was doing workshops for people wanting to write memoirs. And I said to him, this isn't really a memoir in as much as that it's more about my grandfather's story. And he said, but you're writing from your perspective, so it could be seen as a memoir. So that's when I decided I don't want it to be about me and my life. I want it to be about the shared history of Australia. So that's when I decided to bring in the man whose house Granddad worked in for about 30 years. And I call him a coloniser. And so he came into the story, and we ended up with dual biographies, the one about the Irish coloniser and the one about my Aboriginal grandfather, and welded them together in the middle of the book. So I've been very happy with this response from family. You can always be a little bit nervous about presenting the stories of major family icons and how other family members are going to be responding to it. But so far, it's all been really positive.
Congratulations. Sounds amazing. You honoured, a promise you made, which is really, really important. Tell me a little bit, if someone picked up this book and they were in your family, what will they get from reading it?
Well, I hope this doesn't insult anyone, but I'm a bit of a left-wing side of the politics. So I've written in there about how women and homosexuals were treated in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, because that came up when I used Trove, the search engine of our National Library, to search newspapers from those times. And it came up and linked in with some of Granddad's stories. Because when he first went to Brisbane, there's a story about him supporting police to rescue a man who they perceived as drowning out of the Brisbane River. And it may have been that the man jumped into the Brisbane River because he was homosexual, and he and another man were interrupted by a police officer who then chased him.
Right.
So, yeah. And then it was when he was following the coloniser around the state, because the coloniser was involved in banking. And there was a meeting in the Darling Downs, and it wasn't me who noticed it, actually. It was the journalist of the time, that there were no women at this meeting of farmers and the government officials talking about developing agriculture in that area. And I think the reason that the journalist noticed it is because it was the same year that women had sent a petition around getting signatures on it, which they got a fair few for the small number of people who were, because that was before Federation in the colony at the time.
Yeah, wow. So it's stories like this that are throughout the book, and people who would want to know more about the history. That's kind of who the ideal reader is.
The ideal reader is someone who's interested in reconciliation, who's interested in Australia's shared history, who is interested in what happened from the impact on the generations that followed.
Yeah.
So we talk about intergenerational trauma, and
Yes.
this gives people insight into the way that generations have responded. Like I talk about my eldest male cousin, and he's
Yes.
the one who gave me a lot of stories, because he and his brother, who passed away many years ago, actually grew up with our mutual grandparents at about the time of the Second World War. And
Yeah.
Granddad served in both World War I and World War II. The Anzac Day is quite important to me because we've had generations of the family who have served in the Australian Defence Forces.
Amazing. And good morning to everyone that's watching. There's a few people saying good morning, and they're enjoying hearing the stories and things like that. So is there another particular interesting story that you might like to share that's in the book?
Well, some of the cousins have said to me, how did you find this all out? So
Yeah.
I've written chapters of when I have visited elders and gone on country with them. And then this year, when I went up to launch the book in Cairns, because that's closest to the Atherton Tablelands where Grandad was taken from, the closest big city, I mean, and I took my partner out onto the country that the elders showed me, and the sacred mountain. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, because when they took me on country, they would, after trying a few times to get me to pronounce it properly, they laughed, and I said, okay, I'm just going to say the mountain. So anyway, the mountain, which is called, I believe, Nagabulgan, and is actually for contemporary times named Mount Mulligan. It's been fenced off by a group of people who are trying to turn it into a tourist attraction. And that was really sad for me, because I couldn't show my partner the beautiful water, billabongs and things that are around the base of the mountain. I mean, it's terribly dry out there. It started off, the colonizers were attracted there because it was a gold field on the Hodgkinson River. But it's got beautiful grass and water at the base of the mountain.
Yeah.
So beautiful. I'm going to be writing a chapter now about what sparked my interest as a child, how that continued as a teenager at Teachers College, and then the chapters about visiting there with the elders. And then the last chapter will be about how I feel about seeing the mountain fenced off, and what I would like for the mountain's future and the community's future, because there's not very many Kuku-Djungan people left anymore. And I've met some very beautiful people from that community. I include myself, even though I didn't grow up there, as part of that country. But yeah, it's just incredibly sad to see it fenced off.
And is this what the second book is about? Because I know you're in the process
of
writing
that's what the second book about. It's about how I found out the information, why I did it, how I found out about it, and how I responded to my last visit there. Because that's one thing for Aboriginal people. If we do find our ancestral country, there is an obligation to go and visit as often as you can.
Yeah, beautiful. And the intent, like moving forward to the future, what do you hope to do with, well, obviously the second book's going to be happening very, very soon, or it's happening right now. I know you told me you got some extra virtual assistant support to do all the non, authoring tasks for you, so
Yeah.
you can focus on writing. What do you hope to do with these two books in print?
I'm using them as a platform for actually doing what I think, I don't know how spiritual other people are, but I believe that I've been given a task, and that is to support non-Indigenous people to actually learn more about Aboriginal people. I would say Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, we do have a woman from the Torres Strait who's married into our family, but I don't want to seem arrogant with regards to Torres Strait Islander culture. That really is for Torres Strait Islander people to teach, but I know a little bit about it from my interactions with my cousin's wife. So yeah, teaching online and face-to-face workshops, that was what I've always done, is teach before I started writing.
And that's the thing, you're just formalizing your own research into, and then you have kind of a framework as to what you can teach and speak on. It makes it a lot easier when you have written about it to speak about it than to just speak off the top of your head. So I always say, if I can write something, then I have the structure of what each of my talks will be and all that sort of stuff. And I think we want to know more and more, what happened, what was the trauma, how has, how people evolve through each generation as well. I mean, look at you, you got your PhD and, you're educating and you're leading the way and inspiring others to kind of, come on, let's move and evolve to the next level and all that. It's really lovely to see. And I'm always so curious and interested, because obviously I wasn't born here, but I've come into this country and I've needed to learn about the different, there's so much multiculturalism around Australia, isn't there?
Yes, that's true. There is. It is the most successful multicultural society on the planet. But what makes me sad is at the time of the 2023 referendum, the statistics came back telling us that non-Indigenous people, there would only be 1 out of 6 who had actually interacted with an Aboriginal person on a person-to-person basis. So obviously we are a small part of the population, but it would be better, I think, if there were more interactions so we could share each other's feelings about what's happening in society, share each other's knowledge about this country. I think that's been, the sharing of knowledge has been shown to be important through what's happening with fire brigades using traditional methods of firing the land to keep it all healthy.
Yeah. Well, and I think back to high school when I had just arrived in Australia at 14. We didn't really get taught anything about Aboriginal history, and I would probably think that would be appropriate. Why would you not? I mean, I remember when I grew up in Macedonia, we were 500 years under the Turkish Ottoman or whatever. We learned all this history about what was happening, before our lives. Like it's very strange that it's not part of the education, so within history here. So I guess that's your mission, to see if we can get it into schools a bit more.
And it's sad that people who do Australian history or Australian studies, they don't get the Aboriginal perspective in that. They get the British perspective. I mean, yes, Britain has had a big thing to do with the country for 200 and plus years, but, Aboriginal people here, I can easily say 60,000, because I keep my eye on what's happening in archaeology, they are finding evidence now that suggests maybe 85 to 100,000 years. So I have to check every week if I'm going to talk to someone about the length of time we've been here to see what the archaeologists have found the most recently. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
a long
I think
time.
it is a long time, and it's like kind of core to what we should be learning, you know, in our studies and all that sort of stuff. So even I wasn't even aware that Australia Day was, you know, like a mourning day for Aboriginal. I didn't know this up until like 4 or 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden I said, how did I not know this? You know,
Yeah.
no one taught me, right? And I said, I was
No.
like, oh, okay. So yeah, so all right, so let's share maybe where people can buy your book. And
Hey,
go
I've
ahead.
got a landing page, and I think you've got the address of the landing page for me there.
I'm gonna share it on the screen. I've got it up here. So this is the landing page. It's Davina Woods, spelled Davina B Woods, phd.com. Okay, so Davina B Woods, phd.com, and you can see the book here, guys. You can order a copy by clicking on this link here, and there's a little bit about Davina there. And of course, as more books come to print, I'm sure you'll add them onto and add them and make this page bigger. So what would be your best advice to give people, like, you know, from what you've written and from what you know, it is knowledge gives us power and makes us more inclusive, because
Yes,
racism is still out there, right?
yes, it is,
Yeah.
yes. So what would I advise people? Is that what you're
Yeah.
going to ask me? Yeah.
Yeah, what's your
I
best
would advise,
advice?
sorry, advice. Okay. So if you want to learn something about Aboriginal people, then do a Google search for Aboriginal knowledge, and have a look at websites that have been created by Aboriginal people. I don't know one Aboriginal person who hasn't identified their ancestral country as a part of their identity on their websites. I put Kuku-Djungan, which is a dialect group of a larger nation of Gugu people, and we all share the language Kuku-Djungan. They are the main group, and that's their language that we share. Gugu actually means language, just like orang on the end of the Woiwurrung, Bunurong, Tuggeranong, Dja-Dja-Wurrung. I think I've missed one out. I apologise to the Kulin Nations. For the Kulin Nations, that sound at the end of their names joins them because it means lip. So for my people, the prefix in our name means language, and for the Kulin peoples, the end of their names mean lip. So they're the parts of language that join us together. And of course, as people would know, our language wasn't written in the Roman alphabet as it is now, or the Greek alphabet, I should say, but it is developing so that you can see similarities. And there is the Australian Institute for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies has a language site called Auslan, where you can put in what you know about your area, and it will either link you to the language group, or it can tell you who are the people on the land that you live, who traditionally own the land that you live on. So
Is the language the same in every area, or is it different dialects?
It's different. I have a cat who's called Maraka Jara. His name comes from the Gubbi Gubbi people, the people who are traditional owners of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. And Mara in a lot of languages means hand or arm. His
Yes.
last piece of his name, Kajara, I haven't heard in any other language, but it means two, his name means two hands. So 10 years, if you want. And
Yes.
my late husband gave him to me at our 10th wedding anniversary. So there you've got it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and I've called my business Mara Nabil because
yes.
I asked elders, could I use language? Yes. Okay, so I went through the language list I have, and Mara again means hand, Nabil means tongue. So it's hand and tongue written word. And I asked the elders if I could interpret it that way, and I was given permission to. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
beautiful. Now I know that name because obviously when we,
Yeah.
put your invoices in, that's your business name, but that now I know the meaning behind it. That's really,
Yeah.
it's been very insightful. Like just hearing, I love hearing stories. I love how you guys tell the stories as well, and educate. So I want to hear more, and so I definitely recommend everyone go check out the book. Obviously, you'll get a lot of insight and history. That we often don't get access to. So bringing this out is really, really important. So guys, go to Davina B. Woods, PhD.com. Go get a copy of the book, or anyone that has interest. I mean, we should all be learning. This could become maybe a textbook one day, in some schools.
Well, a couple of my friends who are from the teaching profession have said, wow, you've really written a textbook for us. And
Yeah,
a
right.
textbook that has actually, I deliberately softened the one massacre site thing that I had to write in there about a woman who would have been an ancestor of mine being attacked by a pack of dogs or being set upon. This man basically used his hunting dogs to kill her. And I wrote that as gently as I could. And they said, yeah, there's nothing in there that we wouldn't have in schools these days. So that was a good thing to hear.
There you go. You never know. Things have happened, and where people have gotten this school in the preppy school bags and things like that. This could be in for historical purposes. So yeah, let's see. Stay tuned, you guys. This is only fresh and new out recently. And Davina's writing her second book, so I look forward to reconnecting for another interview once that's out, so we can share it with the world. But thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing your insight, your wisdom. Obviously done so much study and research, and your stuff. So I highly recommend that we all have a bit of a read and take some time to understand each other, and definitely the first people of this country. Awesome. Have an awesome day, everybody. I will see you guys for another interview next week. Look forward to it. And as I always like to say, go out there and smash it out. Bye.